In liquid democracy, you can vote directly on any issue you want. But if you don't want to vote, your values can still be represented by someone you trust. Suppose you care a lot about women's rights, but don't care a lot about corporate tax laws. Your friend Bob is a super smart guy and you trust him a lot. With liquid democracy, you can delegate your vote to Bob so that any time a vote comes up that you don't have the time, interest, or energy to take part in, Bob can step in and vote with 2 votes instead of 1. Now, if Bob wants to pass his votes on to Sally, she can vote for all 3 of you. If at any time you stop trusting Bob, you can take your vote back instantly, without having to wait years for another election like you do in our current system. This means that the people with the most voting power have that power because people trust them.
Political action is not agitation, it's construction. One of the core questions about governance is who gets to represent whom, right? So our proposal is to implement a liquid democracy protocol where we can choose different people to represent us for different topics, right? So I can choose someone to represent me for matters regarding healthcare because I know that they are a doctor that's been working, she's been working in the public healthcare system for 35 years. I trust her with my vote. So we can have a bottom-up, dynamic representation that surfaces social leadership. That's called liquid democracy. We can give ourselves an identity. Nation states are losing their monopoly on giving us an identity, but that's going to the corporations, right? Facebook is trying to claim the right to give us an identity. But there's another way of doing it. There's the network providing their identity. This is Roma. She's my daughter. She's 2.5 now. This was the day after she was born. Right, so when Roma was born, we registered her birth on the blockchain using a system called proof of existence before we registered her with the state of California. So it's not the states and it's not the corporations that are telling my daughter that she's someone in the world. We did that. The network is providing for that identity. So there is another way. But essentially what we wanted to prove was that if the United States disappears as a construct, or if California disappears as a construct, which is what it is, we believe in the idea of the United States. Mm-hmm. We believe in the idea of countries. They're not a physical, they don't really exist as such. We believe that they're an institution that exists. And they haven't been here forever, so there's no reason to believe they're going to be here forever. So what we wanted to do was to say this event, Roma's birth, took place at this point in time. And we're appending this to this ledger that it's an append-only ledger, so it's incorruptible. You can't go back and change that information. So the idea was like showing that there is a way to give ourselves an identity and say, like, this happened, this girl was born here. And I don't care if the state of California tomorrow goes crazy and, it's that her birth certificate doesn't, have any influence. It's there, and it's going to be there. So yeah, blockchain baby doing it. Who counts the votes? Right, this is another key part of democracy. I come from a country where the ballots are burned after an election. Where we count the votes manually. I did this when I was running for elections myself. Until 2 o'clock in the morning, fighting with the other party, stacks of papers like that. They're called sheet lists, like listas sábanas, like a sheet. They're that long. They're like a canvas. We have a better way of doing it. We can use technology. We can use the blockchain to register the votes and build an incorruptible ledger. No one is going to tell us that the votes are not what they were. Right? There's a far better way of doing this. What jurisdictions? That this is another key piece of democracy. Again, I'm from Argentina. Argentina represents me on all issues regarding in the international arena. They vote for me in climate change issues, for example. But why can't, Costa Rica represent me? They have a much more progressive energy policy. I trust them with my vote. Hell, I would give them money to push what they're doing everywhere in the world. But I can't. Why? Because I'm Argentinian. And we still live in a world designed for nation states. With Democracy Earth, we did a digital referendum for Colombia. When Colombia voted the referendum for peace, 7 million Colombians couldn't vote because they weren't in Colombia at the time. We're in the 21st century. This blows my mind. And so what we did was we grabbed the referendum for peace, we divided it in many different clauses, and we asked them to vote in those different clauses. And the thing with referendums is that they are a very blunt instrument of democracy. It normally gets boiled down to yes or no, for or against one issue, and everything else kind of pivots around that. But in this case, when we did it with Democracy Earth, we showed that most of the clauses, like 90% of the clauses, were approved, except one, the one that actually prevented the referendum for peace to get approved, right? If the FARC were allowed to be part of government. They could have approved 90% of the referendum instead of losing the whole battle, because it's hinged on just one issue. So this is Democracy Earth. Obviously, we're experimenting. This is a learning process. Any group can give itself their governance institutions. We need to learn how to do this. We haven't done it for such a long time that we don't know how to be active participants, active citizens. Democracy Earth is built around these three issues that I discussed: identity, peer-to-peer validated identity with blockchain keys; representation, it's global, it's dynamic, it's horizontal, it's called liquid democracy; and voting. The network stores the votes. It's a shared incorruptible ledger. We are not bound by the political institutions we've inherited. We collectively own them. It's up to us to decide what democracy do we want, what governance structures do we want to build. And Buckminster Fuller said a phrase that I live by: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that renders the existing model obsolete. So I urge you, every time you wake up in the morning and you just, like me, you feel you just want to go and fight reality, think about what do we want to build instead? What do we want to replace it with? Because you know what? It's up to us.
Comes from ancient Greek polis, the city-state, in which the first kind of democracy was carried out by its citizens. They, like us today, identify problems and discuss them. We do it on the streets and in bars, and sometimes begrudgingly at Thanksgiving dinners. In Athens, the citizens all came together on a designated hill outside of the city to discuss current issues and create policy solutions. Every free man, literally only free men by the way, had a say and a vote to decide on a policy for each issue. Thus, word on the street was transformed into politics. This input from citizens into policymaking is what we call direct democracy. Modern nation-states, like Germany in our example here, do not share one common public space where all citizens could meet. Reaching an understanding about common issues merely by talking them over is unfeasible for the amount of people that would have to be included in our modern societies. The problems of our time are very much different from those of ancient Greece in three ways. Because of the diversity among our citizens, mitigating their issues is far more complex. Moreover, to be a citizen today is no longer a vocation. Unlike the men of Athens, we usually have to work to earn a living and do not have the time to spend all of a day pondering and discussing political issues. That may be part of the reason why many people today feel they do not have the adequate expert knowledge about those issues to contribute to the political sphere. What most modern democracies do instead, then, is have designated representatives from the populace devote their full time to be professional politicians. They carry out the public discussion of issues in our place. Mass media channels their discussions back to our societies, but only the politicians get to decide on those issues in the designated political arena. We, the public, do get the chance to vote for a representative of one worldview or political persuasion in certain intervals, usually every few years. In most of our democratic systems, the representatives are being organized through party affiliation. The majorities that come about in the elections then get to decide on current issues, and turn them into policies for as long as they are elected. We regular citizens do not get to have an input on policymaking during that time. This system of politics is what we call indirect democracy. Recently, there are people who are no longer satisfied with such a rigid system that all but eliminates the input of citizens from policymaking. They argue that any citizen at any time should have the chance to make their voice heard in the policymaking process, even if they do not want to become full-time politicians. Full-time politicians and parties may still be useful, but every citizen should be given a vote for every issue on the table. In this system, people may choose to delegate their vote to another person whom they trust to make an informed decision in their place. They in turn may delegate those collected votes further on to yet somebody else, a politician who stands for a certain worldview perhaps. They may also choose to elect professional politicians themselves. And now, people also get to vote on policies directly. Now, there are several ways in which the input from people may be transformed into policy. Moreover, whenever there is a particular issue in which a person has such a strong opinion they do not want to trust anyone else to make the decision for them, they can take back their vote from the person they delegated it to and vote on the policy themselves. It is this fluid alternation between direct democracy and indirect democracy that gives name to the proposed system of liquid democracy. Modern technology has made a public space that all citizens can inhabit possible. Instead of on a hill outside the city, we may meet in cyberspace. We can discuss events online to determine issues that warrant policymaking. Collaboration tools, of which Wikipedia is but one small example, can facilitate ways in which many people can have an input on policies. And computers and modern cryptography can tally votes and the delegation of votes so we can decide on those policies. This way, all citizens could partake in policymaking once again, much like on the Agora, the hill outside of Athens.